All right, everybody, we are back for another edition of College Football Focus. And today we have a great guest, Dusty Dvoracek from ESPN ABC, one of the better analysts on TV. How are you doing today, Dusty?
I'm doing fantastic, man. How we doing? I can't believe it's the final week of the regular season. Crazy.
Yeah, I know. It just went by in the blink of an eye, didn't it? I mean, it seems just like last week that LSU and USC were playing week one, that end of Labor Day game and all that stuff. And now here we are a week before championship week. So I always tell people, pay attention and savor it because it is gone in the blink of an eye.
So true.
Um, let's start off kind of a little breaking thing today. Mac Brown had said he wanted to come back, and UNC kind of nicely, in a statement, sort of dismissed him. What are your thoughts on Mac Brown and kind of the legacy he left, not only at North Carolina in two stints, but winning national championship at Texas and coaching football in general?
Man, I love Mac Brown. And I obviously competed against him when I was in college. He was head coach at Texas when I was at Oklahoma, and gotten a chance to know him really well when he was at ESPN still, and I had first gotten the job. We crossed paths quite a bit, and now since he's gone back to North Carolina, covering his teams, doing his games, he's one of my favorite people in college football. He's great to deal with. I think he's good for college football. He's what he's what coaches are supposed to be. He's obviously he's going to help impact young people in a positive way, and he's also the track record's there. He's won 100 games at both Texas and North Carolina. The only coach in college football history to have 100 plus wins at two different places. He's a college football Hall of Famer for a reason. And I hate to see it end like this. He had come out and said, you go back to the James Madison loss, and it kind of seemed like, well, maybe he was going to step away. And then he had kind of let it be known the last couple of weeks that he's coming back. He reiterated that after the loss to Boston College. And then now for him to, kind of be forced out and be let go. I'm glad that he's able to coach the final game against NC State. But I was wondering after that Boston College game, it didn't go the way that they had hoped, just kind of what would happen. And it's unfortunate, man. Mac Brown's a great man, great coach, and college football Hall of Famer. So I don't know what he wants to do after this. He could probably get back into broadcasting if he wants. Personally, I think someone like him should be, on a committee or in a position to help shape the future of college football. I think about the Tez Walker situation, how he vocally fought back against the NCAA. I think he would be someone that if he even wanted to do it, would have a great perspective on what's best all around, from the coaching side of things, from the student athlete side of things. And I think that men like Coach Brown should at least have a voice in the room as we continue to shape the future of what college football looks like.
Yeah, and being an older coach, you would think that he wouldn't really kind of fancy a lot of the stuff that's going on, but he seems like, at least what he says, he's sort of adapting to it. And like you said, he pushed back on Tez Walker. It seems like maybe he doesn't love NIL, but he knows that it's going on. So he just seems like a good guy all around. And you're right. When he was doing studio stuff in games, I always found him to be real entertaining. And obviously he has a wealth of knowledge. So hopefully he has earned the right to do whatever he wants to do. Moving on, last week you got to see one of the more chaotic endings that I think you're ever going to see in college football with Arizona State and BYU. First year of the revamped Big 12. It's kind of been like this every week. And I think I read there are like 9 or 10 different scenarios with a week left of what could happen for the Big 10 title game or Big 12 title game. What have you, from your experience last week and just following the league in general, is this the kind of chaos you like? And do you think that this is what's going to come with realignment maybe in the future?
Well, I think it was expected to a certain degree. I think we were kind of framing this league as the conference of competition, with just how close you thought it was going to be. What I did not see coming is the order, like the fact that Arizona State picked 16th to now be in a position to have a direct path to Arlington. For even BYU picked 13th and the season that they've had, it's obviously fallen off the last couple of weeks. But I think that everybody thought that there was, maybe half the league that would have a legitimate chance to compete for that route to Arlington. The teams that are actually competing for it, I think that's what maybe we didn't see. So surprised and not surprised, if that makes sense from what we've seen unfold. But I think it's been unbelievably entertaining each and every week. I mean, you see that with the tight point spreads and the close games and games that come down to the very end and teams just kind of beating up on each other. I'm sure for Brett Yormark, he doesn't love that, only because like he loves the fact that it's competitive, right? And because that leads to games that people want to watch. That leads to something that you can go really sell. The hard part is when you cannibalize yourself, when you beat up on each other, makes it tougher to get multiple teams in the college football playoffs. So I've had 2 Big 12 games this year. We did the Texas Tech upset of Iowa State in Ames a few weeks back, and then we were just in Tempe for that wild one against BYU, which both those games down to the wire, down to the very end. So the games that I've had a chance to be there in the flesh, they've lived up to exactly what we thought about this conference. And I think this final weekend is going to be fascinating. If all 4 of those teams, Colorado, BYU, Arizona State, Iowa State, they're all sitting there with 2 losses. If they all win, then I believe it's Arizona State, Iowa State. They're going to be playing in the Big 12 championship. So I would say that, 3 of those pretty clear-cut favorites outside of Iowa State, who's playing Kansas State. That's a game that clearly Farmageddon could go either way. But we're all going to be tuned in, dialed in, and watching it. I would say it feels, safe to say that Arizona State, they've got the clearest path. I think if they win, it's tough to envision them not being in Arlington. So the job that Kenny Dillingham has done in year number 2, he's got to be on the short list for National Coach of the Year. I just think if they get to Arlington and they win a Big 12 championship, as great as Kurt Cignetti has been at Indiana, you'd be hard-pressed to find anybody more deserving of National Coach of the Year than what he's done right there in his own backyard where he grew up, where he went to high school, and what he's done with that program is nothing short of sensational.
Yeah, and really, you could have 3. I mean, what Dion has done at Colorado, Kalani Sitake at BYU, and Kenny, all 3 of them could get consideration for National Coach of the Years. All 3 have wildly exceeded expectations. You're right about the chaos. I took a swing for the fences and took Arizona to win the league because I love Noah Fafita and Tet McMillan. Hasn't quite happened on defense, but you're right. It's almost completely jumbled and upside down, and it is a fun follow, definitely. Moving on a little bit to Heisman Trophy. I know that it's getting to be award season. Do you think it's just a 2-man race, or do you think that maybe Cam Ward and Dylan Gabriel and maybe somebody else could at least get some attention, or is this pretty much between Travis Hunter and Ashton Jeanty?
It feels like that's what it is, which I got to be honest, it's a little refreshing this year that it's not just the top quarterbacks that we're talking about for the Heisman Trophy. For me, it's Travis Hunter. I just think that the guy has been sensational. Both sides of the ball. You could make the argument he's the best receiver in college football, and I think he is the best cornerback in college football. I think that he's a first-round pick on either side of the ball. I've never seen somebody, that elite on both sides of the football. And I respect, not just his stamina and the ability, the endurance he has to go out there and play that many snaps in a game, but mentally, like the mental focus to be dialed in on game plans on both sides of the ball, that requires so much energy, so much time throughout the course of the week, and to be able to go out and execute on both sides of the ball. I've never seen anything like it. I mean, he is special. And, I do not have a Heisman Trophy vote, but if I did, it would go to Travis Hunter. I don't think there's anything that can transpire throughout the rest of the season that would change that. Now, I think just getting invited to New York City is, a reward in of itself, to be honored, to be recognized, to be there throughout the Heisman ceremony. I think that is important. And I think that clearly is still up for grabs in the conversation for some different guys. But I do think that it's Travis Hunter one. I think what Ashton Genty's done, eclipsing 2,000 yards and what is it, 27 touchdowns. I think he's up
Mhm.
to now already, and he's still going to have a regular season game. He's going to have a conference championship game left to still add to those totals. So he's done this. The consistency he's done it with has been remarkable. I mean, from week one all
Yeah.
the way to now, and with defenses knowing what's coming and completely game planning to take him out, for him still to be able to show up and be able to produce at the level he has. It's been a lot of fun to watch. But Dylan Gabriel's been great. I think Will Howard has had a season that I don't think is getting enough attention. I think both those guys, and for Will Howard to have a big stage against Michigan, and I just project forward. I think they're going to beat Michigan, and we're going to see them, square off again. It would make sense to me, to have one of those guys potentially, if not both of them, in New York City, because I think both guys, first year transferring in, have had outstanding seasons leading their teams to where they're at, the top two teams in the country.
Yeah, I actually had Ashton number one until about 2 or 3 weeks ago because, like you said, what he's been doing, we've seen it once with Barry Sanders. But
Yeah.
I mean, even a bad week for him, 145 yards and 2 touchdowns, any running back's going to take that. But you're right about Travis, just the way that he's naturally so fluid. He runs pretty good routes. I don't say he's a great route runner, but after the catch, he's electric, and teams don't throw at him, and he still has 3 interceptions. So I have also switched to Travis. I always like to include a defensive player. I have Caleb Downs on my list.
Okay.
And I also like to have another. I've got Harold Fannin Jr. from Bowling Green in my top 10.
Oh, nice.
That's a guy who liked Tyler Warren a couple weeks ago when
Yep.
Penn State was touting him. I went to go see a Bowling Green game, and they lined him up in the backfield. They lined him up in the slot. They lined him up out wide. Western Michigan couldn't do anything with him. So if it truly is a guy who impacts a team, then I think that he at least has to get considered, but he won't get invited. But yes, I would love to see Travis and Ashton both get invited, and I can't see a scenario where they don't. I'm with you. I think Travis is probably a snowball rolling downhill now, and he probably wins it.
One thing you didn't mention is skill set, his ball skills.
Yeah.
When the ball's in the air, I mean, the guy just makes incredible plays. Really, you go back to last year against TCU in that opener. Remember that pick he had near the end zone?
Yeah.
When the ball's in the air, whether he's on offense or defense, he can make plays on the football unlike anybody. And he's sensational. So Tyler Warren I love the way they use him, by the way. Like
Mhm.
I just, the way he impacts in a multitude of ways has been sensational. Give Andy Koltanicki a ton of credit. I think that recognizing he's their best offensive weapon and to use him whether it's the USC game where he's got 17 catches and just unguardable. He's playing center. He's playing wildcat quarterback. I mean, he's just all over the field. He is so much fun to watch. And the one thing about him, he is incredibly athletic. I mean, I think a more athletic player than what people probably realize. So definitely a lot of really good players around in the country. And I'll tell you someone else who I've had a chance to see in person. I think Dylan Sampson has had a sensational year for Tennessee. His ability to find the end zone at the clip that he has, he's really, really helped impact that football team. And I think put them in a position that if they can handle their business at Vanderbilt this week, they're going to be punching their ticket to a playoff spot.
Yeah, him and Cam Scatabo, who you got to see last week too.
Love both
He's
of those
an all-around great player too. So,
Yeah.
I guess moving on. Every week we seem to hear it doesn't matter the league. There's some weird call that maybe impacts a game or just being too over officious. It seems like it's really magnified this year. Is there anything that can be done about the officiating problems at the collegiate level?
I mean, look, I wish I could sit here and say yes. I mean, I've heard a lot of ideas, and I think you can try to implement some. I think just continue to more and more, incentivize referees so you get a bigger referee pool, right? And I think that the more you can incentivize that position, I mean, like a lot of these guys have a lot of other things going on. So I think that the more you can get these officials to that to be essentially their full-time job,
Mhm.
to where that's what they're focused on all throughout, at least at the very minimum, just the football season. Whereas, like, talk to some of these guys, they've got other jobs. They're as focused on other things as they are that. Um, I also think, you know, how much does it change their calls in the moment? I don't know, but I've heard a lot of people say that they should be held accountable and have to answer for some of the decisions they make in game. I'd be okay with that. Look, coaches are accountable and have to answer for what they do. Players are as well. Officials are not. I've
Right.
also heard people push back on that and say they don't want to. If you wanted to say that officials have to answer questions, I would say, okay, I would be fine with that. I don't know. I don't know in game how much that cleans it up. You know what I mean? Like, I don't, are they going to call different things if they think that they have to answer after the fact? Because it doesn't, having to answer for it is one thing. Maybe that makes us all feel better when feel that there's an egregious call made, but doesn't change the fact that that call is made. I think the real thing is, how can you make in-game officiating even better? And I think everybody right now is trying to figure that out. And I think that, the bigger pool you can have to choose from, I think the better the product is going to be. The more time that these guys have to put into their craft to be the absolute best that they possibly can, I think that gives you, good chance as well. But no different than quarterbacks miss throws and running backs fumble and receivers drop the ball and linemen miss blocks
Mhm.
and defensive linemen jump off sides. We all make mistakes. And I'm not here to say that I don't get as frustrated as the next fan, but I just want to know, in their defense, who is perfect at their job. Kickers aren't perfect at their job. They
Right.
miss extra points. And so I do think we have to remember that. As much as we want to act like, we want to expect that they need to get all these calls right, and there's a lot riding on it. I do think we need to take a step back sometimes and just remember we all mess up.
Yeah.
Everyone does. And as long as there's the human element in officiating, as much as it frustrates us, mistakes are going to happen. So I think that's just something that we're all going to have to live with. Can we hope and push for it to be better? Absolutely, 100%. But as long as there's human officials, human error is going to be a part of it.
Right. No, I agree. And I like the whole bigger pool, incentivize them with higher pay, certainly. And I think that that might solve some of the problems. Also, it's not as big of a problem as it was in previous years, but officials used to skew pretty old. Now it looks like we are getting some younger people in there because the speed of the game. I mean, keeping up with players, keeping up with plays, you need people who are going to be in physical shape that can keep up with stuff and all that. So a lot of good ideas there. So tonight is another release of the college football playoff show. The committee, obviously, we've seen through a couple of weeks, has had their own, I guess, thought process. Where do you fall on how teams are selected? Do you think that it should be purely accomplishment, noting that not all schedules and leagues are the same? Or should it be power ratings, maybe some amalgam of a computer ranking or power ratings to really pick the best teams? Where do you stand on the selection process and how should teams be picked?
I think it's got to be, to me, it's a combination of both. I don't think it's just one or the other. And I also think that, I mean, this is hard. Like, there's not a perfect science to this. And the one thing that I've just grown to kind of appreciate and understand, someone's going to be mad. Okay.
Mhm.
You are not going to be able to make everybody happy. So let's just get that out there right now, because I've been on these mock selection committees when it was 4, and we already knew the results. And beforehand, you look at these scenarios after the fact, and it's hard to get everybody on the same page. A lot of people look at things through a different lens. and which is why you have that 13-team committee
Mhm.
and you come out with the results you come out with. And but for me, I think that resume it would have a bigger impact, I think, than power rating. And I do believe if this year has taught us anything, we can't just live off hypotheticals, because hypothetically, Oklahoma had no business beating
Right.
Alabama. They're a 14.5-point underdog. Florida at home went from a 10-point underdog to a 13.5-point underdog, yet they beat Ole Miss. We're seeing more upsets. We're seeing more and more upsets year over year in this new landscape of college football. So if we're just going to base it off of a power rating, much like a point spread is set up, what are we really doing? The hard part too is just it is a real thing. Like, every conference is not created equal. And
Right.
I don't want to dive into, which conference do I think is the best and how do you, but it's not the same. I go around, I study all these different films. Every conference, even within the Power Four, is not the same. And so this is not a perfect science. And anyone that wants to tell you, oh, it has to be done this way or it has to be done this way, they're just wrong. Like, I don't know. It is a flaw in the system, but it's college football. It's always been flawed. And so I just think that, you have to to me, it's a combination of both. Like, just because Georgia has 2 losses, to me, I'm going to have them ahead of some 1-loss teams, but I'm also going to have some 1-loss teams ahead of Georgia that I might think on a neutral field, I think Georgia's better. I think that there's a lot of factors at play. Resume is the biggest piece of the pie for me, but
Right.
then there's also, how have they played lately? What are their biggest wins? For me, I value, wins over good losses. Like
Mhm.
that's my perspective. Some people they want to see, what's your best loss? They value that. Like Notre Dame, to me, I still look at winning at Texas A&M by 10 points. That's a heck of a win.
Yep.
Everybody wants to point to that loss to Northern Illinois, and I get it. That's a bad loss, but that was a really good win. And guess what? They haven't lost since then, and they've continued to play really good football. So, like, for
Mhm.
me, and don't get me started on, do I think Notre Dame should be in a conference? They don't have a
Right.
conference championship. But if I'm just looking at their resume, like, I think Notre Dame should be one of the top 5 teams in the country based off what they've done, even with that loss. Whereas some people, they don't feel that way. So I think it's fascinating, but I think we do have to look at these resumes. Those have
Right.
to carry a lot of weight in the room, but we just have to also all understand on some level, this is very objective and this is not a perfect science. And that's part of what makes college football want to make you pull your hair out and part of what makes it so awesome.
Right. Yeah. The one thing, speaking to the leagues not being equal, the only thing I really vehemently dislike is the auto bids for the conference champs. You could have a second place team, for instance, Ohio State is probably better than the ACC champ or the Big 12 champ. And you could say the same about Georgia and Tennessee. So I don't mind those teams getting in, but to automatically slot them 3 and 4, that means the 5 and the 6 look like a great sweet spot hole to be in. So you're actually favoring teams that are going to be seated lower. So if there's one thing I wish they could get rid of, it would just be the auto slotting of conference champs. Otherwise, I'll give it a chance to play out and then see how it works.
I like the auto bids. Like, I like the fact that if you win, especially in the Power Four, like I think that if you win a Power Four conference, you should have a spot you should have a spot in the
Mm-hmm.
playoff. You should have a
Right.
chance to dance. I agree with you. The fact that those are going to get the top 4 spots, it does feel like that's going to be something, after these first 2 years of the playoff, they go back, they look at, and I think there's going to be a big change in this next, iteration of whatever this playoff is. I think most people think this thing's going to grow. Is it 14? Is it 16? Exactly what's the number look like? But I would agree with you. I think that as we look at it, given those top 4 buys to not the 4 top teams, but to the 4 highest ranked conference champions. I think that's an aspect of it. We're all sitting there going, is this really the right way we should go about this? I think most people are looking at saying this doesn't make a ton of sense.
Right, right. And I guess last thing. So, given that, and given what we're going to see tonight, from what you've seen, film, games you've covered, all that, just your honest opinion, who do you think is the best team in college football right now?
Well, I've got Ohio State as the best team in college football, but I don't think they deserve or should be number one. I don't think they will be tonight. I think they'll check in at number two. And we obviously saw Oregon and Ohio State play, and I think we're going to get a chance to see them in Indy. And who knows, maybe we get a chance to see them a third time. But I think Ohio State. I think that defense you saw against Indiana, holding them to 153 yards, really all three levels. The defensive line, Cody Simon had a great game at linebacker. You mentioned Caleb Downs already, and what they have in that secondary. They are elite across the board. Some would say it's the best roster money could buy. But for me also, just the way Will Howard, I think, has really played better than most people thought. I think Will Howard has had an undervalued year this year. I think that he's played very well. Even in that loss to Oregon, I thought he was really good. And there's been times like the Nebraska game where they kind of faltered, they fell behind, took them right down the field, and they scored. The way he bounced back at Penn State on the road after that pick six, the way that, he led his team right down the field and they go score. There's been situations and moments in this season where you kind of wonder, and Will Howard responds and he plays some of his best football. That's really impressed me. They've overcome issues on the offensive line. Does that come back to bite them in the playoff? Losing your an NFL offensive tackle, losing your center who's been so integral to your team. We'll see. But I picked Ohio State before the year based off what I've seen this year. Even though they lost at Oregon, to me, they just ran out of time. That was a knockdown, drag out, big time quality matchup that I thought both those teams were equally matched in Autzen on a neutral field. I tend to lean Ohio State. We'll get a chance to see that here in a couple of weeks, but winning at Penn State the way that they did, beating Indiana in the nature that they just did, I think that there's a lot to like about Ohio State. But I'll also just say this. One of the beauties about this year in college football, I don't know if there's anybody that's just head and shoulders above the rest.
Right. I agree.
Which, there's been years in the past where you felt that way. I do not feel that way this year, which is another reason why I think it's very fitting we have this expanded playoff. I think there's multiple teams that, barring injury or the way a certain game shakes out, could really make a push and a run at a national championship. So though I got Ohio State as the best team in the country, I by no means think it's some foregone conclusion that they're definitively going to go on and win the national championship.
Right. Now, I agree. And that's the other thing, getting back to the playoff debate. 2019, you pretty much knew LSU was going to win. Some of those mid-teens, Alabama, Clemson, you knew they were going to win. But yes, this year definitely speaks to as many as 6 or 7, or with a little bit of luck, maybe 8 teams would have a real shot at it. On Will Howard, I think what people were not factoring into the equation was his leadership ability. Kansas State is not an offensive juggernaut. People forget he won a conference title as a sophomore.
Yep.
He played in bad weather. He's a guy who rallies his team. So maybe Kyle McCord has better arm talent when you talk about that stuff for the NFL. But I think leadership and just getting your guys to respond is a very underrated aspect. And I think that people were wait and see with Will Howard. Buckeye Nation, from what I've read on Twitter and message boards, it's like 99% everyone has bought into the guy now. And I think the Nebraska game, like you said, was the turning point. They futzed around. It looked like they were going to lose. When it was crunch time, boom, he got him to score. And that was it. So it's been and he fits Chip Kelly's offense too. So that's obviously really good. And I guess last thing, holiday coming up, Thanksgiving. What is the one side that you think has to go, that you do not touch when you see it on the table?
I mean, I'm a former 300-pound nose tackle.
Right.
I mean, like, there's not much that I won't touch, if I'm being completely honest. I mean, Wow, that's an interesting question. Typically, everyone says, "What's your favorite? What's your favorite side, or what's your favorite dish?" What's the one thing that has to go,
Look, I don't
man?
touch green bean casserole.
Oh, green bean
That's
corn
not my
casserole is my
favorite.
number one seed now. I mean, don't.
Okay.
I mean, come on. I mean, Mike, we can't be dogging out green bean casserole or
No, folks who love it, that's great. But I'm like more potatoes, stuffing,
you know what it is for
and so
me? Honestly, it's mashed potatoes. I
really,
typically like mashed potatoes. I have mashed potatoes all the time. Like when
sure.
I'm stacking my plate, give me all the casseroles you can. I want sweet potato casserole. I want green bean corn casserole. I want dressing or stuffing, whatever you
Mhm.
want to call it. I'm getting turkey. I'm getting cranberry sauce, mashed potatoes. You may have to throw some mac and cheese on there. I
Right.
rarely, if ever, put mashed potatoes on my plate, so they can go.
Mm.
Get it out of here. I don't need it.
All right. We can agree to disagree on that. But anyway, thanks for coming in. You have a great holiday. We will be watching this weekend for the final weekend of college football. For folks who want to find you, how can they do that? I know you've got radio and TV. Where are all the
Yeah.
places they can find you?
I'm on, Monday through Friday, Sirius XM, Channel 84, College Ports Radio, Danny Cannell and myself, 6 to 9 Eastern in the mornings, little Dusty and Danny. I can promise you we'll entertain you and talk a lot of college football. You see me on Saturdays in the fall, man, doing games for ESPN and ABC. And you can check me out on X, social media, at Dusty Dvoracek. Mike, I appreciate what you do for college football. You do a great job covering the sport. And thanks for the time today, man. Happy holidays. And I can't wait for the end of the season, man. It's going to be fun.
Great. Me too. Thanks a lot. You be good, and we will touch base again.